was a very personal conflict. It wasn't, these were not bombs being dropped from 10,000 feet in the air. It was neighbor against neighbor. These were people who worked together, whose children went to school together. The killings were just extremely, extremely atrocious with machetes. People were lined up, by the dozens and, just killed within seconds. And in fact, it's been reported that the rate of killings was 4 times that of the killings that occurred in Nazi Germany at the height of the Holocaust. The estimates are anywhere between 800,000 and 1 million, and these all occurred within the time frame of 2 to 3 months.
I've seen interviews with Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, subsequently, who said his inability to prevent that and to do something more immediate was one of the great frustrations of his presidency.
We did not act quickly enough after the killing began. We did not immediately call these crimes by their rightful name, genocide. We cannot change the past, but we can and must do everything in our power to help you build a future without fear and full of hope.
And so the reaction, in large part, took the form of what the judicial reaction, how would we bring to justice the people that were involved? And that's where the international community stepped in the form of a Security Council resolution from the United Nations Security Council, setting up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda.
The ICTR was an ad hoc tribunal. It was not a permanent tribunal.
Its scope of investigation and prosecution was quite limited. There were specific date ranges.
Those most responsible would be the focus of the tribunal, not only to punish them, but also to send a message to the international community that this type of behavior would not be tolerated. And if there were any other dictators out there thinking of doing this, then they would think twice about it. The actual trials were held in Arusha, in Tanzania, which is a neighboring country to Rwanda. The idea was to sort of move the trials away from this battlefield, so to speak, that was still, somewhat in flames, and move it to a neutral territory.
Around the world, there are very different procedures that different countries use to assess criminal liability. So the UN had to develop a set of procedures that would be acceptable and would be viewed as fair around the world.
There was a very enterprising associate at the firm at the time, Helen McFarlane, who was sort of following, the progress of the court and the activities that were taking place in Arusha, and she felt very strongly that the firm should get involved, and she brought this idea to management at the firm.
One of the reasons that we felt our global firm was so well positioned to assist at the ICTR is because the tribunals can really draw on laws all around the world. We could send a UK admitted lawyer, we could send a French trained lawyer, a US trained lawyer, and everyone's background was useful.
And for the past 15 years, we have been a permanent fixture at the ICTR, assisting the Office of the Prosecutor in bringing to justice the perpetrators of the genocide.
So we started out doing research projects in our own offices. They would come and we would talk with them, and initially very, very skeptical. Why would a firm ever want to do this? What do you really want? We have this ethic of pro bono, and we want to help. We want to be as helpful as we can. And then as we got to know them better, we said, what if we send a lawyer here to work with you on the ground? That started our externship, where we would send a person a month from Shearman. And I think the first person went in 2000, and it went on over the years.
It was an incredibly enriching, vibrant, meaningful environment. And we had no shortage of lawyers from all different groups.
We put out word to all the lawyers across the firm, and we said, this is what we're doing. If you would be interested in considering this, let me know, and we'll keep a list. Over the years, my team developed what we called the memo.
There was layers upon layers of advice, both about daily life, travel, your work, all of which helped contribute to my understanding of Arusha and what I would be doing.
Read the memo in full, not bits and pieces, not just the part about your visa and your vaccinations, but read the rest of the memo. It is so extraordinarily helpful.
Everyone had their own experience, and when they would come back, they could update the memo and share with us what they took away from it. There was not really one person who was unchanged. Everyone came back changed from having that experience.
I think you come back with a lot more than just having worked at the ICTR. You come back from having lived in the developing world, which I think it's very memorable.
And I think everybody felt how important this work was, how important it was to make sure that the Office of the Prosecutor was as well prepared as they possibly could be.
We said, well, we can send a team of our experienced litigators to come over along with judges and prosecutors to deliver a training program on trial advocacy skills.
In some cases, it was simply that they had never cross-examined a witness, or maybe never examined a witness live in court. They had been more involved in investigating criminal cases or putting together documentary records. But the dynamic of a live exchange with a witness who doesn't always say what you expect them to say was something that was very new. And so what we do is we would establish a fact pattern. We would write witness statements from various witnesses, expert reports, pieces of evidence. And then
they were on their feet. It wasn't about lecturing to them, standing at the front of the class. We made sure they got up, they practiced doing cross-examinations, direct examinations, putting witnesses on, prepping witnesses, closing arguments.
We ended up having no trouble recruiting very, very important people to help us with this. One of those people was Loretta Lynch. She's now the Attorney General of the United States. And we invariably had the experience where, having joined us for one of these training sessions, they would be clamoring to be included again.
The progress, from the beginning of the training to the end, it was just incredible. Even though it was such a short period of time, the participants were really able to hone their skills, which was extremely satisfying and gratifying for us as the faculty. For the first time in history, members of the media were being indicted and charged with incitement to commit genocide.
There were a few instances in which people took to the radio and said, I hear there's a group of our enemy located in this church, you need to go kill them. That's direct incitement to murder.
Through their spoken words and their printed words, they were equally culpable for what took place. We had to tread very carefully into this territory because we did not want to set a precedent. We're establishing law that could then be used to suppress free speech. But we thought that this was a very unique case that warranted the actions that were taken against these members of the media. This was a court that dealt for the first time with accusations of genocide. No other court has issued a judgment on genocide.
The effort and the success of the ICTR was 99% theirs. If we could help in our small way of just speeding up the process, then that, I think, is a very, very important contribution.
And we are unique in the sense that, we're the only firm that have had this long-standing partnership with the ICTR, and we take it very, very seriously. The fact that we have contributed in some way to bringing these perpetrators to justice, but also establishing law in this area. There's nothing more exciting than that, to be a lawyer and to be a part of this movement to make new law. That will set the stage for years to come. It's just extremely incredible, extremely gratifying. We
started to think about the next thing that we would do. Some of the lawyers who worked on the ICTR started to work with the prosecutors at the International Criminal Court.
The mandate of the International Criminal Court is very similar to that of the ICTR, except that the ICC has much broader jurisdiction, and it's set up to be a permanent tribunal to deal with these types of issues as they come up anywhere in the world.
And the member states understood that the first prosecutor was a very, very important role. It was the birth of the court, the birth of this experiment, which might work or not. So you needed a figure that was strong and confident but had good judgment. And the person they selected was Luis Moreno Ocampo, a prosecutor from Argentina. And Paul and I were in Europe, I think on another matter, and we went to The Hague and met with Luis Moreno Ocampo just to talk generally about our experience.
I feel Shearman Sterling has a very unique approach because many of the lawyers in Shearman Sterling were sympathetic with our mission. In fact, when Steve Fitzbine and Paul Anderson came to my office, they had experience in Rwanda. No, they were spending years working in Rwanda. So for me, it was not just a law firm from New York with high-quality people. Also, they understood differences. They understood how to work in this international environment. So for me, the combination was unique. One of the biggest problems with international tribunals is that you have people coming from everywhere. I ended with 300 people from 90 different countries. Shearman Sterling helped us to develop a common practice, how to behave in court, how you can cross-examine witness, how to do opening statements, closing statements, all these basic ideas. These are where cases are huge, so we cannot fail. They cannot learn in court. They have to be prepared before. So that's why the training for us was crucial.
We're extremely proud of the work that we have done at both the ICTR and our ongoing work at the ICC. And of course, our work doesn't stop there. We are committed to international criminal justice wherever the need arises.
We're still at the very beginning. And to be involved towards the beginning of that effort of the first International Criminal Court, it has been a wonderful experience.
It really makes you sort of step back and assess what is the meaning of humanity. You know, why am I here? What is my calling? And how can I make this world a better place for the next generation to come?
One of the problems to be in the International Criminal Court is after that, it is going to be a normal lawyer because you feel you are helping people to do something and you're helping the world to develop a new way to live together in peace.
That we could play any small part in responding, anything that we could do, I'm proud that we could do it.